A 260-pound female world champion sits across from Bruce Lee at an arm wrestling table. 4 seconds later, that table explodes into pieces. What happened in those 4 seconds didn't just break furniture. It broke the laws of physics, changed an entire sport forever, and created a legend that scientists are still trying to understand 50 years later. This is the story of the most impossible strength competition in history, and why engineers had to redesign arm wrestling tables because of what Bruce Lee and Margaret, the Mountain, O'Brien did on one unforgettable night in 1971. Los Angeles Sports Arena, November 1971. The International Strength Athletes Exhibition is showcasing the world's strongest competitors across various disciplines. Margaret O'Brien is the headlining attraction. She just defended her world title in Moscow 3 weeks earlier against the Soviet Union's best female arm wrestler. She has never lost a match in her professional career. Never. Over 200 opponents have tried to beat her. Men, women, doesn't matter. She's destroyed them all. Her right arm measures 19 inches around the bicep, larger than most men's thighs. She can curl 185 pounds for repetitions. Sports journalists call her the strongest woman alive, and nobody has evidence to dispute that claim. Margaret the Mountain O'Brien, 7-time consecutive world champion, undefeated, unstoppable. Bruce Lee wasn't supposed to be at the exhibition at all. He came to watch his friend Dave compete in the deadlift competition. Between events, Bruce is standing near the arm wrestling stage when a journalist recognizes him and asks for an interview about his upcoming film project. During the conversation, Margaret overhears someone mention Bruce's name. She walks over, curious about the small Asian man drawing media attention. She's never seen his films, doesn't know who he is. But she notices his size immediately and makes an assumption that will change her perspective on strength forever. "You're a movie star?" Margaret asks, extending her massive hand. Bruce shakes it politely, noting her grip strength immediately. It's like shaking hands with a hydraulic press. "I make films, yes. Action films, martial arts." Margaret smiles, not mockingly, but with genuine curiosity. "With that frame, you must use a lot of camera tricks. No offense, but you look like you weigh about 140 pounds soaking wet." Bruce smiles back, accustomed to such observations. "I weigh exactly 140. You're very accurate. And yes, I use some camera techniques. But most of what you see is real technique, applied with maximum efficiency." A journalist, sensing a story opportunity, interrupts. "Margaret, would you arm wrestle Bruce? You know, movie star versus world champion. Make great photos." Margaret laughs, thinking it's a joke. "I'd hurt him. I outweigh him by 120 pounds, and I just beat the Soviet champion last month. This isn't even fair." Bruce remains calm, understanding her concern is genuine, not arrogant. "I appreciate your consideration, but I'd be interested in trying if you're willing. I understand you'll likely win, based on raw strength, but I'm curious about the technical aspects of arm wrestling." Margaret considers this. She's arm wrestled hundreds of people, but never someone so dramatically smaller who approaches it from a technical study perspective rather than ego. "All right, but we stop immediately if I feel your arm about to break. I've injured people before accidentally, and I don't want that on my conscience." Bruce agrees to these terms. Within minutes, the exhibition organizers have cleared the stage and positioned the official arm wrestling table in the center spotlight. Word spreads quickly through the arena, and the crowd, watching other events, converges on the stage. Everyone wants to see this bizarre mismatch. The world champion versus the movie star. They sit down at opposite sides of the table, and the size difference is immediately apparent to everyone watching. Margaret's arm looks like a tree trunk next to Bruce's. When they clasp hands, her hand completely engulfs his. It's like watching a child shake hands with an adult. The referee, a professional arm wrestling judge, inspects their grip and positions their elbows on the pads. Standard rules apply. No falls, no lifting elbows, ready positions. Margaret sets her shoulder and locks her structure, applying about 30% of her strength to establish dominance. She's learned through experience to start conservatively with smaller opponents to avoid injuring them. Bruce feels the immediate pressure and understands he's dealing with strength that exceeds anything he's encountered in martial arts training. This isn't just muscle. This is 7 years of world championship power concentrated into one arm. Ready, go. The referee drops his hand and the match begins. Margaret applies 50% pressure, expecting to pin Bruce's arm immediately. Instead, his arm holds position, not moving toward the pin pad, but not giving ground either. Surprised, Margaret increases to 70%, the level she typically uses to defeat male competitors. Bruce's arm trembles slightly, but maintains position. His entire body engages in creating structural resistance. The crowd begins murmuring, not because Bruce is winning, but because he's surviving against force that should have overwhelmed him instantly. Margaret's competitive instinct activates, and she commits 90% of her maximum strength, the level she used to defeat the Soviet champion. Bruce's arm bends slightly toward the losing position, maybe 15 degrees. But then something unexpected happens. Using a technique from Wing Chun, where you redirect force rather than oppose it directly, Bruce subtly shifts his wrist angle and shoulder position. Margaret's force vector partially misses its optimal line. It's not enough to win, but it's enough to prevent the immediate loss everyone expected. The table begins making sounds. Small creaking noises that the referee notices immediately. Hold position, he calls out, concerned about equipment failure. But Margaret, now fully committed and somewhat frustrated that she can't finish the match, applies 100% of her championship strength. Bruce, understanding he can't maintain defense much longer, makes a decision that shocks everyone watching. Instead of trying to prevent losing, he suddenly releases all resistance, allows Margaret's force to continue in the direction she's pushing, but without the opposing force she's expecting. The result is catastrophic for the table. Margaret's full strength, suddenly unopposed, drives downward with the entire weight of her commitment. Simultaneously, Bruce redirects his body position to maintain technical structure while allowing movement. The combined force of Margaret's 260-pound frame generating maximum power, plus Bruce's 140 pounds of technical redirection, exceeds the table's structural capacity. A loud crack echoes through the arena as the oak surface splits lengthwise, right down the middle between their locked hands. Both competitors fall forward as the table collapses beneath them, still gripping each other's hands, landing on the remains of what had been a professional, great arm wrestling table. The crowd goes silent for 3 seconds before erupting into chaos. Nobody has ever seen a table break during an arm wrestling match. Ever. The referee stands frozen, unsure how to rule on something not covered in any regulation book. Margaret releases Bruce's hand and stares at the broken table in disbelief. I've arm wrestled for 12 years, competed in 40 countries, beaten over 200 opponents. Never has a table broken. What just happened? Bruce sits up, checking his shoulder, which absorbed significant impact, and examines the broken table with scientific curiosity. I think we created a force multiplication that exceeded the wood's tensile strength. your power moving in one direction, my structure redirecting in another, and the table caught between two opposing physics. The exhibition organizers rush over, concerned about liability and equipment damage. The table cost 200 and was imported from Sweden specifically for professional competition. Margaret's coach arrives, checking her arm for injury, while Bruce's friend Dave helps him up and examines his shoulder. The referee, after consulting with officials, makes an unprecedented announcement over the arena speakers. Due to equipment failure, the match is declared null and void. No winner, no loser. However, I've been refereeing arm wrestling for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what just occurred. Both competitors demonstrated extraordinary ability. Margaret approaches Bruce after the initial confusion settles, extending her hand again, this time with different intent. I owe you an apology. I assumed because you were small, and from movies that you had no real strength. That was ignorant. What you did there, that wasn't just technique. You have real power, just concentrated differently than mine. She pauses, looking at the broken table. I felt what 260-pound men can generate, and you matched that at 140 pounds. How? Bruce appreciates her honesty and scientific interest. Your strength comes from muscle mass and leverage, developed through years of specific training. My strength comes from whole body integration and neural efficiency, developed through different training. He gestures to demonstrate. You generate power from your arm and shoulder. I generate power from the ground up through my legs, hips, core, and spine, all channeling through my arm. Different methods, similar results when properly applied. He pauses. Also, I wasn't trying to beat you. I was trying to understand the force you generate and find the technical answer to surviving it. They talk for 30 minutes after the exhibition, comparing training methods and discussing the physics of strength generation. Margaret admits that Bruce's technical approach exposed a weakness in her strategy, that she relied primarily on overwhelming force rather than technical positioning. Bruce acknowledges that Margaret's raw strength was something he couldn't match pound for pound, and that his survival depended entirely on technical redirection rather than direct opposition. They discuss the broken table, agreeing that the combination of her mass, generated power, and his technically channeled structure created a force neither of them could have produced individually. The sports journalists who witnessed the event write extensive articles, though they struggle to classify what they saw. Was it a demonstration of strength, technical skill, physics? One reporter interviews structural engineers who analyze photos of the broken table. They calculate that the force required to split oak of that thickness would need to exceed 4,000 pounds of concentrated pressure. Neither competitor could generate that individually, but their combined forces meeting at perpendicular angles at the moment of table failure created the destructive result. Margaret goes on to defend her world title 3 more times before retiring undefeated in 1974. In interviews, she frequently mentions the Bruce Lee match as the most educational moment of her career. It taught me that strength, without technical understanding, has limitations, she says. She begins incorporating technical positioning into her training, which she credits with extending her championship reign. Bruce uses the experience as a teaching example in his martial arts philosophy, demonstrating that size and strength advantages can be mitigated through technical knowledge and strategic thinking, though never completely eliminated. The broken table becomes something of a legend in arm wrestling circles. The Swedish manufacturer requests photos and witness statements, unable to believe their product failed under human force. They eventually send representatives to examine the pieces, confirming that the break resulted from extraordinary pressure applied at an unusual angle. Creating sheer force the table wasn't designed to withstand. They redesigned their tables afterward, adding reinforced core structure specifically to prevent similar failures. Though they acknowledge that the combination of factors that caused the break would be nearly impossible to replicate. Scientists studying biomechanics become interested in the incident when footage emerges years later. Video analysis reveals that Bruce's body position during the match showed complete integration of muscle chains from feet to fingertips, something typically only seen in elite Olympic lifters. Margaret's force generation showed textbook mechanical advantage, using her mass and lever arms optimally. When these two different approaches to power generation met at angles that neither could fully control, the result exceeded what either competitor intended or expected. November 1971, one table, two competitors. Two different philosophies of strength, one impossible result. The match lasted 4 seconds. The table lasted 50 years in arm wrestling legend. Margaret O'Brien proved that genetic strength and dedicated training can create extraordinary power. Bruce Lee proved that technical skill and body integration can compete with physical advantages that seem insurmountable. Together, they proved that when different forms of power collide at the wrong angle, even Swedish oak can't survive the force. That's not movie magic. That's physics meeting philosophy. That's 260 pounds of championship strength meeting 140 pounds of technical mastery. That's the day arm wrestling changed forever, and a table died proving it. The question isn't who was stronger. The question is, what happens when two completely different approaches to power meet in 4 seconds of impossible physics? The answer is still scattered in pieces on the floor of the Los Angeles sports arena 50 years later.